So how do we define things as right or wrong, good or bad? Well, in Western society, we mainly define them by two things. The first is what our standard is in our Western society, and the second is the standards of other groups that we happen to feel guilty for or feel sympathy for. But apart from these fairly superficial standards, we don't really have allowances for those outside of our realm of self and our realm of guilt and sympathy. For example, in the United States, our draft age for when a boy becomes a man and can be sent off to fight in wars if his country demands it of him is currently 18. But we don't draft women, and the draft age isn't the same all over the world. In the Kony 2012 incident, Joseph Kony responded to his accusers and claimed that these accusations that he was mutilating people and committing war crimes were falsified and were being done by the Ugandan government as a form of negative propaganda by blaming him for it. Which sounds like something I would do if I were the Ugandan government and wanted to arouse public support against someone I didn't like. But he did say that he sanctioned the use of child soldiers, just not abducting them and taking them from their families. His reasoning was that fighting is a part of everyone's life in Africa, and no exception is made for children considering the circumstances in which everyone has to live. And he's still demonized on this singular point alone. So what makes our draft age, 18, special? Why is 18 the magic number that we all hail to as the correct number? Why not 19 or 17? Well, most people, if they think about it for a few moments and don't actually put deep thought into it, come to the conclusion that the youth have a right to live and must be protected, and the older are more prepared to die. That's the reason that's usually been sold to people, though it isn't true. Most of our inherent respect for elders is simply because they are older, even if they are no wiser than someone younger. Older people have just been around longer, and we inherently treat them all as if they have a lot of wealth and wisdom and knowledge and deserve respect, even when this is not the case and the respect is not warranted. In truth, we give respect based on the amount of time which someone has been alive, not based on how wise or intelligent they are. The fact of the matter is that draft age gets lower the more dire your country's situation gets. If America actually suffered a brutal land invasion and considered that it might lose, you can bet the draft age would drop, and drop, and drop, or we would start drafting women. Or both. Now, in years past, if we're going to look at older civilizations, the age where someone became a man and could be expected to fight sat at around 12 years old. Our number, 18, is, according to how society treats it, a magic number that possesses magical powers that suddenly makes everyone who conforms to it a good guy, and everyone who doesn't follow this arbitrary rule to the letter to be evil. And as such, I see the Kony 2012 situation as gradually becoming more and more ridiculous. Condemning someone in situations that are worse than ours for doing something we would all do in the same situation is inherently hypocritical. Let me tell you a little story. When I was in third through fifth grade, I attended a public school in California. We learned that if we called the police, they would arrive in 1 second. When I got to fifth grade, this number was changed to 1 minute. One day, my class was taken to the school's library to watch an anti-bullying video, in which one person, wearing a big bright orange shirt with the word bully on it, was demonstrated as using bullying tactics, and these tactics were being successfully defended against. And this was taught to the class as how you should respond to bullies. Now, the number one anti-bullying tactic in the video was to pretend to be mentally retarded so that the bully would be frustrated into leaving you alone. A student spoke up and said that these situations were scripted and didn't actually work on the playground, and he was sent out of the room. Now, we had 3 drills that we practiced in this school. One was for fires, one was for earthquakes, and the third was the stranger on campus drill. For this drill, everyone was instructed to lock the doors of the classrooms and huddle in a circle in the center of the room. We were instructed that if this drill was going off and we were outside the room at the time, that we would be permanently locked out. If you came to the door asking to be let in, you would not be allowed back in, because a bad guy might be behind you and using you to get us to open the door and let him in. If you were outside the classroom when one of these drills went off, you were supposed to go hide in the bathroom or run to the staff office. Even as a 5th grade child, I perceived this to be wrong and cowardly. I wasn't the only one. Several of the students in my class felt that we should get into a group and start looking for whoever was missing if something like this happened. But we were all told no. Even as children, the cowardice of the adults sickened us, all of us. We knew it was wrong, and so the next year, I left the public school system and attended a private school for my middle school years. This was my choice. I did not want to stay in a public school system after that. In the United States, middle school is 6th grade through 8th grade. I don't know if you guys out of the country use the same grading system that we do, but this would be when I was turning 12 years old. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my private school when I was in 6th grade. It was expected that most students, male and female, would compete on the school's various athletic teams. During my first soccer team briefing, we were given a session on psychological warfare. We learned that a lot of our competitors would put one or two really big guys on the team, and most of the work would be done by them to carry the rest of their team. So we were told to attempt to injure them and take them out of the game. And the effects of this would demoralize the enemy team so badly that they couldn't win against us. The coach did not care if we were fouled or penalized or removed from the game ourselves, because the psychological warfare tactics yielded more positive gains for us. In the 6th grade, I also learned about biological warfare. I learned about the Gulf War, the use of nuclear weapons on Japan, firebombing campaigns, starvation tactics, and many of the biblical Old Testament massacres. Once again, I remind you, I was 12 years old. On the athletic teams, we learned how to fight. We learned that even if we were sat out of the game for knocking one of the other team out, we were still helping our team by this sacrifice, and we had done our job, even if we were injured in the process. And there were injuries. I received some too. Marks of honor for our bravery and our sacrifice. The girls had some rough training also. Most of the students would play basketball after school each day for a while before their parents came to pick them up. The girls played it with us too. One of them even got a broken nose from the training one day. If you're wondering if the right and good, playing fair, and being a sport won out against us, my response to you is that we were undefeated in every sport for the first 2 years which I attended. When we received a new coach in the 3rd year, who insisted on sportsmanship and playing nice, and kicked several veteran players off the team for their rough tactics, this flipped, and we suddenly lost every single game. To which so many veteran players, meaning all the 7th and 8th graders, quit the team, and the school didn't have enough players to compete anymore and had to kill most of its teams before the year ended. But for those first 2 years, we learned much about victory, about glory, about the evils of war. We learned that these evils were necessary, that they were common in our history, that denying humanity's history and censoring the history books to deprive children of knowledge, lying to them to make them feel better, was a great crime. And so we learned about many of history's massacres, slaughters, and the downfall of civilizations that had come before us. We learned to fight and compete on the athletic teams without mercy. I was 12 years old. But for the first 2 years in that school, I was happy. We took our education to its maximum potential. This was a choice by the students. We wanted to know. We wanted to learn. And when things changed in my 3rd year, I was no longer happy, and I left the year after that. So don't tell me that a 12-year-old boy's mind is so delicate and fragile that showing them reality would damage them. The fact is that the world is not perfect, and we rob our children of their education by editing our history books to hide things that we find shameful, depriving them of knowledge and information. We create idiots, not intellectuals, out of our own children, and we act as if we are doing them a favor by maiming their minds. People seem to want to favor delusion over truth, because truth is cold and merciless. But the cold truth is that favoring the delusion is self-destructive. And the cold truth is that if our own government were locked into a war where our own nation was being invaded, and we very much risked losing, and the situation got dire enough, you can bet our children would start fighting. Our children would fight for their own futures because they'd have no choice, because no one else would be left to fight for them. And we seem to think that it's right to criticize them for this, so long as it's not happening to our children, so long as it's somebody else that we get to scrutinize, so long as this standard that we've created and are using on other people doesn't have to be used on ourselves, on our own nation. Think about that for a moment. So if you disagree with me, leave a comment. Explain your rationalization. Maybe we can get a good discussion going. Let's see what happens. I'll see you next time.